Spanish town Jamaica held an air of mystery that seemed to linger in its cobbled streets and centuries-old buildings. Once the capital of the island, it wore its history like a heavy cloak, every corner whispering secrets of its colonial past. In the bustling markets, the scent of jerk chicken and ripe mangoes mingled with rumors of gossip. Vendors exchanged wary glances, their voice dropping to low hushes when certain names were mentioned. The night air in the outskirts of Spanish Town was thick, heavy, and alive with whispers. Crickets chirped, a lone barn owl hooted in the distance, and somewhere deep in the shadows, chains rattled ominously. The rolling calf was out. Everyone knew its legend, a massive fire-eyed beast that dragged heavy chains behind it, hunting the careless and the defiant who dared to wander in its domain after dark. It was more than a cautionary tale. It was a warning etched into the soul of the community. Nikki, however, didn't believe in old-time folklore. At 24, she was headstrong, rebellious, and fiercely independent. Raised by her Auntie Georgia after her parents passed away, Nikki had grown weary of the constant warnings and tales meant to keep her in line.
Me a big woman in a auntie. Rolling calf? Them the story they have for picnic.
Auntie Georgia, a stout woman with a firm demeanor and a deep faith in both God and the old ways, would shake her head.
Nikki, you think I joke me a joke with you? The rolling calf is not a playing business. Just make sure, say, you stay out of the bush after dark. You hear me?
But Nikki didn't listen, and that's where the trouble began. Chapter 1. Whispers in the Wind. It was a humid Friday night, and Nikki was bored. The outskirts of Spanish Town weren't exactly brimming with excitement, and she longed for more than the slow pace of life and the same faces day in and day out. Her friends had invited her to a late-night gathering at a scheduled spot just off of Old Harbor Road. She hesitated initially, remembering Auntie Georgia's warnings, but the pull of freedom and fun was so strong.
Nikki, nobody go out tonight.
Auntie Georgia said as she folded clothes in the veranda. Her eyes didn't leave the shirts in her hands, but her tone was sharp.
Me say, in my dream last night, me see chain and fire. Nikki, me a beg you, stay home now.
Auntie, you need to stop the foolishness now. Me go come back before midnight, I promise you.
Midnight?
Auntie Georgia turned her face to her expression dark.
You think rolling calf a wait till midnight for you? You need to humble yourself.
But Nikki had already slipped on her Air Jordans and was out the gate, ignoring the muttering prayers Auntie Georgia called after her. Chapter 2. Shadows of the Past. Nikki's family had a long history with the rolling calf. It was said that her great-grandfather Isaac had been a notorious Obeah-man who invoked dark forces to protect his illicit gains. One night, after a particularly bloody feud with a rival, Isaac disappeared. The villagers whispered that the rolling calf had taken him, dragging his soul to the underworld as punishment for his wicked ways. The stories didn't end there. Her father Patrick had his own encounter. As a young man, he dared to venture into the cane fields late one night. He returned home pale and trembling, muttering about glowing red eyes and chains that seemed to move on their own. He never spoke of it again, but from that night on, he was a changed man, always home after sunset and quick to warn others against tempting fate. Auntie Georgia had recounted these tales countless times, but Nikki had dismissed them as mere superstition.
Auntie, me nah make no dopey story. Come define my future. Me not afraid of no dopey if you run from me.
Chapter 3. The Gathering. The gathering spot was lively, with dancehall music blaring from a Bluetooth speaker and the smell of roasted breadfruit and jerk chicken filling the air. Nikki felt a surge of exhilaration as she greeted her friends and joined the festivities. For a while she forgot about Auntie Georgia's warnings and the oppressive darkness that seemed to press against the edges of the clearing. As the night wore on, the group's energy shifted. Somebody dared Nikki to venture into the nearby bush and bring back a piece of sugarcane as proof of her bravery. Never one to back down, she accepted the challenge with a laugh.
Me soon come back here. No worry about me.
She made her way into the dense undergrowth, the chatter and music fading behind her. At first, the adventure felt exhilarating, a private rebellion against her aunt's warnings. But as the night deepened, an unsettling silence fell over the area. Even the crickets stopped their chirping. The air grew colder, and Nikki's playful confidence began to waver. Chapter 4. As Nikki ventured further into the cane fields, the darkness seemed to deepen unnaturally. Her flashlight's beam barely pierced the shadows, and the occasional rustle of leaves set her on edge. She told herself it was just the wind, but an uneasy feeling gnawed at her. Then she heard it, a faint clicking sound, like chains brushing against the ground. She froze, straining her ears, and the sound came again, closer this time. Her heart thudded in her chest as she swung her flashlight in the direction of the noise. Nothing. Just rows of towering sugarcane swaying gently in the breeze. She laughed nervously, scolding herself for letting the old stories get to her. But as she turned to leave, the sound returned, louder and more deliberate. The cane stalks rustled, and Nikki's flashlight flickered. She took a step back, her breath quickening.
Who that? Who they in a bush?
No answer. Just the oppressive silence and the faint, rhythmic clink of chains. Chapter 5. Back at the gathering, Nikki's friends were growing anxious. When one of them, Franklin, decided to search for her, he brought along 2 others for courage. As they entered the bush, they saw it, or rather, heard it first. The clinking of chains, the heavy thud of hooves on the ground, and then a blood-curdling scream that froze them in their tracks. "Jesus Christ," Franklin whispered, his voice trembling. The group pressed forward cautiously, the beam of their flashlight cutting through the dense foliage. What they saw next would haunt them forever. Nikki wasn't alone. In the dim light, they saw a man they recognized, an older villager known for wandering drunk late at night, on the ground, writhing in agony. His face was contorted in terror as he tried to crawl away from the massive figure looming over him, the rolling calf. The beast's eyes burned like coals, and the chains snaked across the ground, coiling the man's legs like living things. With a sudden, violent motion, the creature jerked its head, and the chains tightened, pulling the man closer. The sound of his screams pierced the air as the rolling calf's fiery breath engulfed him. His skin blistered, his cries turned to gurgles as blood pooled around him. Franklin and his friends stood frozen, unable to move as the scene unfolded. One of them retched violently, the stench of burning flesh overpowering them. The rolling calf turned its gaze towards them briefly, its fiery eyes locked onto theirs. It let out a deep, guttural growl, and the friends bolted, abandoning their flashlights in their haste to escape. They didn't stop running until they reached the safety of the clearing. Breathless and trembling, they tried to explain what they'd seen, but their words came out as incoherent bursts. The party dispersed quickly, fear spreading like wildfire among the group. Chapter 6. The air in the cane fields was thick and still, as if holding its breath. Nikki's footsteps faltered as the clinking grew louder. The flashlight flickered one final time before dying completely, plunging Nikki into darkness. And she saw them, 2 blazing red eyes staring at her from the shadows. The rolling calf emerged, its massive form illuminated by an otherworldly glow. Smoke billowed from its nostrils, and the chains clattered with every step. It moved with deliberate menace, its eyes never leaving hers. The creature was horrifying, more monstrous than she'd imagined. It was a shapeshifter, but this form was its most terrifying guise. A hornless goat with 1 human leg, 1 horse leg, and 2 goat legs in the back. Its curled tail arched over its back, and its eyes glowed like blazing goals. This creature was horrifying, more monstrous than she'd imagined. It was a shapeshifter, but this form was its most terrifying guise. Its massive, bull-like head sat atop a thick, muscled neck, veins bulging like taut ropes beneath its slick, leathery skin. Its horrifying, mismatched legs, an amalgamation of forms. One a sinewy limb made from a human, another a powerful horse's leg, and the two hind legs twisted, cloven like a goat's. Each step it takes echoes with a sickening thud, as if the earth itself recoils from its touch. Flames shot from its nostrils, and the stench of burnt sulfur mixed with rotting flesh filled the air. Around its neck was a collar, from which its heavy chain dragged and rattled ominously. Nikki tried to scream, but no sound came. Her legs felt rooted in the ground as the beast advanced. It let out a guttural growl that shook the earth, and Nikki's vision blurred with terror. Nikki's trembling hand found a double-bladed knife tucked in her pocket, a gift from her father who believed in being prepared. Desperate, she remembered the tales she once mocked. She jammed the knife into the ground before her, the blade glinting faintly in the moonlight. To her astonishment, the rolling calf halted. Its fiery eyes flicked to the knife, and then a low growl rumbled in its throat. But it didn't retreat. It circled her slowly, chains rattling ominously. Nikki realized the knife had brought her some time, but not salvation. Then, as if summoned by an unseen force, the sound of a conch shell echoed through the air, distant yet piercing. The rolling calf froze. Its fiery eyes narrowed before it let out an ear-splitting roar and disappeared into the shadows. Nikki collapsed on the ground, trembling. Her vision swam and the world seemed to tilt. In her haze, she thought she saw the faint figure of a woman, shrouded in mist, standing at the edge of the cane field. Then everything went black. Chapter 7. Nikki woke up in her room, her body aching and her mind reeling. She couldn't remember how she had gotten home. Auntie Georgia was nowhere to be seen, and a deep unease settled over her. When Auntie Georgia returned later that day, Nikki confronted her.
Auntie, me can't stay here. Me no safe.
Auntie Georgia's eyes narrowed.
Listen to me, Nikki. Last night, spare you. But you see the next time, stay out of the darkness, or your life gone.
Nikki swallowed hard, but refused to stay another night. That evening she packed her things and left, determined to seek shelter with Uncle Lester on the other side of town. Auntie Georgia watched her go with a solemn expression, her lips pressed tightly together. As Nikki ran down the street, her heart pounded. The weight of her decision gnawed at her, but the need to escape Auntie Georgia's oppressive warnings was stronger. The street was empty, the air eerily still. Then she heard it, the familiar clink of chains. Her blood ran cold as the sound grew louder, echoing off the buildings. She glanced around her shoulder and saw them, those blazing red eyes, burning through the darkness. The rolling calf emerged from the shadows, its monstrous form more horrifying than ever. Flames shot from its nostrils as it let out a deafening roar. Nikki screamed, her voice pierced in the night, but no one came to help. The few who heard her cries locked their doors and whispered prayers, too terrified to intervene. The next day, the only trace of Nikki was a torn piece of her clothing and the scorched ground where she'd stood. In the now silent house, Auntie Georgia's journal lay open on the table. Its final entry read,
The chains bind me soul to this shape. Me protect, me punish. The bloodline escape the curse, and this night claim another. Me will carry this burden for better or worse.
The neighbors whispered of the screams they heard, the fiery eyes in the night, and the curse that hung heavy over the outskirts of Spanish Town. But no one spoke openly of Auntie Georgia, who disappeared soon after, leaving behind only the echoes of a protector's love and the chilling reminder of disobedience cost.